Mr. President, I rise today to voice my concern as an American and my outrage as a grandfather-to-be about the lack of action to fund our response to the Zika epidemic. Zika has come to Miami, Florida, and Congress needs to step up and provide the necessary funds to fight this terrible virus. Zika is like any other national emergency, and we are a nation that always responds to emergencies. And while I'm encouraged with the news that Republicans are seeing fit to do their job and drop some of the conditions in their Zika bill, which this body has voted down 3 times already, there's no excuse for any further delay. No excuse for doing nothing while Americans face a risk that we have the power to mitigate. The alarms have been ringing for months. We knew Zika was coming. But instead of being proactive and prepared for what was about to hit our shores, Republicans in Congress chose to poison our response with right-wing ideological policy riders that prevented us from appropriately addressing this issue. And to make matters worse, rather than removing these unacceptable provisions from the bill, they simply chose to ignore it entirely and send Congress on vacation without acting. Since that time, we have had at least 43 instances of locally acquired Zika in the Miami area, and nearly 16,000 locally acquired cases in Puerto Rico. In the 50 United States, we now have 3,000 total cases, including those that were acquired outside of the country. And most frightening for families throughout our nation is that we know of at least 1,751 cases of pregnant women infected with Zika, a truly devastating diagnosis for everyone involved. And today we've heard from the head of the National Institute of Health's Infectious Disease Institute that without immediate funding, the current ongoing clinical trials into a Zika vaccine will be forced to shut down, putting a halt to any real chance we have of developing a preventive vaccine in the near term. Now, we as Democrats have fought the opposition to pass the president's request for $1.9 billion to battle Zika. In May, the Senate, in a compromise, a bipartisan compromise, agreed by a vote of 89-8 to fund $1.1 billion in response funding. But that bipartisan agreement was derailed in the House of Representatives, where Republicans insisted on adding a poison pill provision that had nothing to do with Zika and everything to do with seizing the opportunity to pursue an anti-family political social agenda that would prohibit family planning clinics from getting Zika funds, directly impacting the health of women in the most high-risk areas at a time that we know that Zika can be contracted not only by a bite of a mosquito, but by sexual intercourse. Mr. President, every major health organization, from the Center for Disease Control to the World Health Organization to the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, has recommended that the best course of action is to increase access to contraception and family planning services to decrease transmission of the virus. So today I call once again on the Majority Leader and the Speaker of the House to address this crisis now. Let's do our jobs and help keep the American people safe, healthy, and secure by addressing this crisis with everything we have and all we can provide to women and families who face an emergency situation no less important and no less threatening than tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, or superstorms like Sandy. We need to quickly and decisively respond. We're already behind. We've lost critical time and sacrificed the progress we should have already made to political obstructionism that has prevented us from providing what we need to ensure maximum protection. We need to act now, not tomorrow, not the next day, not next week, now. But here we are, 7 months after the president's original call for an emergency response to Zika, and 5 months long before Miami had become ground zero for the virus in the continental United States. 5 months before the first confirmed cases of locally acquired transmission occurred and began to spread. Now, my Republican colleagues talk a lot about national security, about defending this nation and its people, and I agree with them. But there are many ways to defend America from the many threats we face, and Zika is one of them. If we believe what we say about keeping America and Americans safe, then quickly passing the necessary funding to defeat Zika is in the personal security interests of the United States. We're dealing with a virus that has tremendous costs. We do not yet know all the potential birth defects that Zika can cause, and we do not know all the potential effects of microcephaly to a newborn or the life expectancy of a Zika baby, but the healthcare costs for the 31-year-old mother in Hackensack, New Jersey, who gave birth to the first Zika baby born in the United States, will no doubt be staggering, in the millions of dollars. At the end of the day, protecting our people from an insidious virus that ultimately can affect the next generation that is being born is, in fact, protecting the public. And in my mind, not acceptable to play politics with a national emergency. We can have all the debates in the world about family planning and access to women's health care, but we are delaying the possibilities of a vaccine being prepared, of mosquito abatement to limit the population of infected insects, and we are denying care to those women who could be or are infected. We need to act now to pass the necessary funding, just as we do in any national emergency against any threat, against any enemy. And Zika is a real and direct threat. And I can talk from personal experience. It's affected me and my family. My daughter lives in Miami. She's now 6 months pregnant with her first child. And I'm deeply concerned for her health, her well-being, and the well-being of what will be my first grandchild. And while this moment is a moment of great joy, every young mother already has concerns in the normal course of events. Will my child be healthy? Will they be safe and free from any illness? These are normal concerns. But Zika adds a new dimension to those normal worries. And we could have done something to stop it were it not for the Republican political obstructionism, particularly in the House. Shame on us that we have not done all we could to mitigate the fear that young mothers are feeling. And that fear is palpable. It cannot be ignored, not by me, not by any father, not by any grandfather. It should not be ignored by Republicans in Congress. And this isn't for me or my daughter. It's too late for her to take advantage of a vaccine or a cure. But it's not too late for other mothers and their children across this country. How can we, in good conscience, not do all we can to attack this problem as best as we can? Now, my daughter's taking precautions. She's doing everything possible to protect herself. But beyond the personal aspect of what's happening in my family, while having a child is a moment of great joy, any woman who is pregnant in Miami, or for that fact, the reality is this knows no limitations geographically. It will continue to spread across the country. It is an added risk that is very real and should be a deep concern to all of us. We want to protect our children. We talk about that in many different dimensions here in different debates, whether it be on education or healthcare. And here we are doing something that every person who is a father here, every person who may be a grandfather understands very clearly. Every woman who serves in the Senate and has had a child understands very well the whole emotional process that goes on as they are worrying about that child, taking care of themselves, having the right nutrition, doing all the prenatal care that they have so that they can have a child that is born healthy. But the difference between what women throughout the country are doing to protect themselves to the extent that they can is that not all of us have the ability to do something about us like those in this chamber have. It's our responsibility. It's our obligation. It's our duty to act in the interest of every family who cannot do what we can by simply passing this legislation and doing it now. The alarms have been ringing for months. We knew Zika was coming. But instead of being proactive and prepared for what's about to hit our shores, Republican leaders in Congress chose to ignore the warning signs and adjourn Congress without acting. Now we're back. Our nation faces an emergency. We're here. There are no excuses. There's no political justification for inaction. At the end of the day, lives are at stake, and we are sworn to protect every American. And I call on my colleagues in both chambers to put the nonsense aside, stop the pointless political posturing, and do your job. We are living in a political season that has devolved as a race to the bottom. Let's not participate in that race by letting the rigid, fundamentalist social agenda of the most extreme elements in our politics overrule common sense and shared values in the face of a crisis and a danger to America. We know what's right. We know what we have to do, and now is the time to do it. It is in that hope that we break the shackles of this absurd political obstructionist chain that is holding back from doing what's right and what's necessary that I look forward to next week, since we will seem to be out of session now, next week, ultimately addressing the concerns that women and families have across this country. We hear a lot about the protection of the unborn. Well, this is the very essence of being able to protect the unborn from an insidious disease that can affect their lives forever. I hope the conscience of the Senate will ultimately move itself to its better judgment.